a couple minutes. We'll see where they're at. When the thought, we'll record it and make sure we get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, is there anybody else on there from Calgary? They're not.
Awesome. Turn it over to Vicky to introduce our speaker.
Excellent. So our
Sorry.
no, that's okay. I just ran into Greg on the way out. He wondered if you were here. So
yes, you
so I'm really happy to be launching our fall 2017 LTAD lunch with Allison Sandmeyer-Graves. Can I still call you the relatively new CEO?
I will wear that as long as I can. It gives me 5 minutes of grace.
There's a lot of grace with that comes with that. So with our CAAWS association, so the Canadian Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport and Physical Activity. And so Allison is joining us from her home office in Toronto. And because of some of again, she's going to present to us some of the, current landscape of the issues with girls and women in sport, some of the initiatives that are coming from CAAWS, and more pertinently to us. Safe to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but Alberta is the only province that got some of the status of women funding.
Alberta and Ontario. So the CAC, Coaching Association, applied for Alberta and CAAWS applied for Ontario. So the only 2 sport-funded initiatives, though, in that whole series of funding.
Yeah, so again, around sort of building leadership, creating positive impact and experiences for girls and women in sport. And also, Allison, just to let you know, I've asked if we do have time, the Ever Active Schools, in particular, Haley, who's on the line, they're doing like a school-based institute for girls. So if this could also become a bit of a springboard for, our next few conversations around what's going on in your world around the girls and women within your sport. So, Allison, I didn't, aside from saying that Allison is originally from Alberta, so she always loves to come back here. And if there's any other details you would like to add, Allison, other than that, the floor and screen is yours.
Okay, well, I don't have anything to add other than I will say I freely admit I'm biased to Alberta. I still follow the Edmonton Journal, and all of my sisters and nieces and nephews and everybody in my family on both sides is in Alberta. So I am really invested in having quality sport experiences for kids in Alberta, and particularly for girls and young women. So thank you for this platform and the invitation to be here. I owe a lot of gratitude to Aaron and to Vicky. And I think to the broader Alberta Sport Connection team, because I was able to be out in person in Alberta for the leadership conference, and what I've seen since is just a continuous dialogue amongst us about what sort of work we can do together and how we can lead this forward. So this is another moment in time where we can connect around this, but I think you can absolutely expect more of this to come forward as the year unfolds. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Does it sound okay? Okay, super. Okay, so my goal with this presentation is, frankly, to move a bit quickly through a few points and to leave some opportunity for conversation at the end. If you do have a question or a comment midway, please, we'll count on Aaron to moderate a bit for us. I think myself and probably the other folks on the phone find it hard to hear the folks at the back of the room. So if it's possible for you to come closer to the mic or for Aaron to relay it, that would be awesome.
You bet.
Super, thanks, Aaron. So here's what this presentation will be, and here's what it won't be. So it's not going to be an education session on the specific LTAD considerations for girls and young women. For one thing, it is a bit tricky to accomplish that in a really effective way in an hour in terms of programmatic things like that. However, we do offer a presentation on that exact topic that I will speak about a little bit more. What this is going to be is, to Vicky's comments, a little bit more of looking at the landscape and an opportunity to connect with resources and insights that you could potentially find valuable as leaders from your various organizations to start moving this agenda forward, moving forward the agenda of, bringing LTAD more to life for girls and young women through your work. So I look forward to your comments and questions and conversation at the end. I want to start, I want to make sure I remember I have a presentation here too, and hopefully I can move it forward. There we go. I want to start by just giving you a quick scan of the statistics. So this is from a report that CAAWS did together with Dairy Farmers of Canada through their Fueling Women Champion initiative. And unsurprisingly, because I'm sure many of you have seen similar stats, participation by girls in sport and physical activity is declining. And of course, that's in keeping with the macro trend. If you look at where we started from in 1992, which is only 38% of girls and women participating in sport, you see that we've already fallen to 16. It makes you really wonder where the floor is going to be on this trend, and it's not positive on the whole. Unfortunately, we consider that there is a particularly steep dropout when girls reach adolescence, which suggests that sport is particularly failing to hold girls' interest or meet their needs at this really influential life stage. And of course, this is one of those moments in time where girls and young women could drop out for life. It's not just dropping out for a little while, it's potentially dropping out for life, which of course impacts their lifelong well-being. And then our friends over at Sport for Life have been doing some really interesting research out in Ontario that really validates what folks have been saying for a while, which is that there is a physical literacy gap that emerges between boys and girls at a very young age. And then, of course, when you see statistics like the one on the screen right now, you can see how that gulf can only widen over time. While we pride ourselves on a sport and physical activity system that is vital to the health of our citizens and our communities, these statistics suggest that we aren't serving, at least not serving well, 50% of the population. So that's sort of where we're starting from, is that there is this gender gap, and that knowing the benefits that sport produces in people's lives and how it connects people to their communities and to the opportunities around them, what can we do to close that gender gap? And considering how the long-term athlete development, how girls and women fit into that model is something that CAAWS has really concerned itself with for some time now, supported and led in many respects by Vicki Barber. So you have this incredible asset sitting around the table with you. So what's at stake? I.e., tell me why I should care. So as we know, sport is a powerful vehicle for a lot of things. At CAAWS, we believe that it's a powerful vehicle to help girls and women realize their full and equal position in society. So while we're talking about closing the gender gap in this program or that initiative or through this organization, really what we're talking about is expanding the opportunities available to women, not just within that program, but through that program. How can we help girls thrive in sport and through sport? And of course, that is reinforced by some research that was produced out of Ernst & Young, or it goes by EY, in combination with ESPNW, that really that did a global survey that really looked at how does sport set girls up for success. And so one of the statistics, for instance, that they landed on is that 94% of women in the C-suite played sports, and that 52% of them played at the university level. And so there seems to be some correlation between girls playing sports and being active and in physical activity when they're young, and their opportunities beyond sport as they age. So, oh, sorry, I'm just getting ahead of myself. So of course, if you consider that the long-term success of sport depends on a healthy pipeline of participants, leaders, volunteers, and other, girls, of course, can be part of that solution. And so more than that, inclusive organizations, as we know, are the way of the future, and organizations who fail to harness this are going to be falling behind. When you consider, for instance, that people are the most important asset of any organization, the fact that so often girls and women are sitting on the sideline means that we're not truly capitalizing on everyone's contributions to sport. So this is in many respects about expanding the reach, engagement, and impact of programs and of organizations. And the better we can do at bringing girls from the sideline into the center and to the forefront, the greater that reach and that impact can become. So that's really the position where I come from, as it being a position of opportunity. I would add, and this is something that we spoke to at the conference in Banff in April, that it's increasingly advantageous for organizations to be thoughtful and strategic about how they are serving girls and young women, because this is something that funders are increasingly interested in. It's something that governments are increasingly talking about. I sit with Vicki and others on a federal, provincial, territorial, that's a mouthful, working group on women in sport. And we are tasked with bringing recommendations forward to the provincial, territorial, and federal ministers on this. These are conversations, happening at the federal level with the standing committee about to table their report that Sport Canada is going to respond to. So there's a lot of dialogue that's happening on this, and I would really advise that that this is something that sports and physical activity organizations, and really anybody who's leading sport and creating sport and physical activity opportunities for folks, should be considering as part of their future vision for their organization in order to stay relevant and in order to be able to compete for the sort of funding that is available. On a personal level, I would suggest that this represents an opportunity to leave a meaningful legacy, something that will impact the value and impact of sport into the future. And so it's something that I would love to leave you to think about, which over the course of this presentation is, what would you like your legacy to be in this regard? So how is change going to come? There are a lot of different theories on this, but I want to provide you with some of my best thinking on this at this point. And some of this we absolutely heard when we sat down with Alberta Soccer and Alberta Hockey at the Alberta Sport Leadership Conference earlier this year. And one of them is absolutely data. Sorry for the blurry picture, I just couldn't resist this one. I thought it was so perfect. Organizational self-awareness is, of course, one of the most important starting points. And you will certainly hear Vicki talk about this. And I think, I shared some stats at the top of this presentation, but for like me, macro, national, even international statistics can be hard to really inform action at the local level, and hard to really motivate action at the local level, right? Because how do those stats relate to us and what we're doing and our organization and how we're trying to move forward? And so one of the first things that I would absolutely say is necessary for us to start moving this forward at an organizational or a programmatic level is to understand where are we at right now? How are we doing? Who's here and who isn't? And to really start to look at that critically. And I know I had folks in the room in April who after it came up to me and they're like, I was texting our operations person and say, how many female coaches do we have? Or how many female registrants do we have? And so that it's difficult really to move forward without understanding where your baseline is. Second one, and this is a personal passion of mine, is personal leadership. We understand that there's organizational responsibilities to inclusion and to ensuring that through especially our publicly funded sport and physical activity system, that it is representative of Alberta, of our cities, and of our country more broadly. But institutions are ultimately just collections of people, and nothing moves in an organization with someone spearheading it, someone leading it, someone advocating for it. And so, we hear time and time again that status quo will just produce the status quo. Same breeds same. And so, one of the things that I'm really challenging people on when I do speak on this topic is to think about what is their personal responsibility to this issue and what is their sphere of influence. Sometimes, I'm talking to the executive director. Sometimes I'm talking to a program leader. Sometimes it's like a coach or someone right on the front lines. implementing programs. Everybody has a sphere of influence and everybody has a role to play on this. And if we're going to disrupt that status quo, it requires people who are prepared to take this on and to use some of their capital to move it forward through organizations. And so CAAWS, one of our goals is to make this feel like less of a leap, to create that community of like-minded people who are ready to support, to provide guidance, and to work through challenges, to celebrate successes, and to keep things moving forward. And so even though, it can feel like a bit of sometimes a lonely task to be that one person in the organization who's pushing for change, you do have this huge network of people behind you to move it forward. But of course, just like a keen person driving it forward isn't always enough. And so often we see that inclusion is a side of desk activity. It's something you get to when all the other core business that we are measured on and accountable for is finished. But of course, we know that work is never done, never. And so inclusion is just that thing that always gets pushed to the next day and then the next day. And so I'm increasingly advocating for people to really think about how can you link this, in fact, to your organizational strategy, goals, and values. And to really bring it in, again, into the middle of that conversation as opposed to an outlier to it. And when you consider that, for instance, PSOs and clubs are really concerned about maintaining their membership and building and expanding their membership, how can serving girls and young women better be a solution to that for you? In the leadership perspective, if you're talking coaches or what have you, women and girls represent a massive pool of talent, of potential volunteers, of potential leaders, of potential athletes. And if we want to just stay with the status quo, again, you're just going to get more of the status quo. But if there's an interest in, how does this serve our mission? How does this serve our strategy? I think it requires us to think differently about some of those same challenges. Education, of course, one of the next steps, and this is where CAAWS provides so much support. We need to expand our understanding of how policies and how practices can help or hinder the involvement of girls and young women. And so we know that this expertise doesn't always reside within every organization or within every program, and that a lot of organizations are faced with the idea of starting with a blank page. And again, our interest is to make that journey a lot easier. There are so many resources that we can make available to you, and we're really committed to supporting individuals and supporting organizations to understand the big picture, but then understand specifically, like, how do I bring this to life? What's the right way for this to factor into my program, etc. And that leads me to the final piece, which is intentional action. So if we're passive on this, nothing's going to change. Again, we'll just get more of the same. And so it really does require us to look at, okay, what are our policies? What are our practices? And how can we, again, ground our thinking on those in our values and in our strategy? And I would encourage, this is something that, the folks who've been working on this a long time talk a lot about, is that there are many instances of one-off programs that run for a few years and then die. And those are a key piece of the puzzle. If we didn't have those, there would be all kinds of girls and young women who wouldn't have benefited and wouldn't be impacted by things. But also, how can we look at it in a bit more of a systemic way? How can we look at it as, how do we change the way we operate, not always just add this standalone program for girls and young women? So the good news is, of course, that nothing has to be perfect or comprehensive tomorrow. And so the key is to make a commitment and to do something. And again, I would say you have the power to make a difference on this. So I know you're sitting here, this is your lunch hour, you weren't totally sure what to expect when you're coming in here. And if there's one message that I would leave you with, it's that you don't have to do everything. The key is to do something. And that's really where change comes. If all of us do a little piece of this, it would be incredible, the change that we could produce over time. And my final point in that is that there are supports available to you. So what's our role? What's my role at CAAWS? What's our role at CAAWS? So we believe in the power of sport to transform, and we believe that equity and advancing equity is how we're going to realize that. So the way that we work is we work in partnership and in collaboration with organizations of all stripes across Canada to support them, to increase awareness, to shift attitudes, and also to increase their confidence, their internal resources, capacity, know-how, whatever that might be, to actually implement changes that will expand opportunities for girls and young women. So as we move forward, one of the things that we're really interested in doing is taking the educational resources that we have, which I'll speak a little bit about, and starting to pair them more and more with really pragmatic tools and resources that, again, make it easier for you to pick them up and to make change. So turnkey things that can help you leapfrog some of the hurdles that others may have encountered. And so, in short, we're here to support you, but also to challenge you and to push you to do the best that you can for girls and young women. And so, of course, what's your role? So most of you around these tables and on the phone work for organizations or lead organizations that effectively create or support sport in this province, creating the opportunities, creating the avenues for people to engage in sport and physical activity. And in a lot of cases, you define how people engage in sport and physical activity, which is a huge responsibility. And so your piece of this puzzle is to introduce changes to policies and practices that are so that they are more female friendly and that will keep girls in sport in particular, whether that be access to facilities, to training staff on coaching female athletes, or whatever that may be. So I would encourage you to think about, is this in your strategic plans? Is this in your operational plans? What would it take to get them there? And what would it take to start to move this forward? So I want to move then really quickly. Let me check my time. I'm just going to talk for a little bit further because I want to share the sorts of resources and tools that we already have available that might be useful to you. So I started off by talking about that self-awareness, that organizational programmatic self-awareness and the data piece of it. And the great news is that CAAWS actually has really simple tools that can allow you to do that analysis. Again, it's not about starting from a blank page. And so on our website, you can find these two different tools. They were developed for, you can see in the heading there, right under the main title. So there's one for community sport and physical activity providers, and then there's one for more of the sport clubs and the PTSOs that gets you to just walk through a very simple 3-page questionnaire to focus on programs, policies, leadership, and the environment. And one of the great things about this is that it doesn't have to be definitive, highly, highly rigorous. Honestly, a lot of it is just about thought starters and conversation starters, going like, wow, I never really thought about that. What are our numbers? Or like, have we ever surveyed the women in our programs, or maybe the people who are not showing up for our programs, to understand why they're here or why they're not here? But that sort of data is key to informing really thoughtful and effective solutions. If you're going to make an intervention, let's base it on something. And so this can be a great starting point for your organization or your program to maybe, even if you're doing some initiatives already, this is one of those things that maybe challenges you to think about some new things. This is pulled right off the Alberta Sport Connection website, and Vicki mentioned it is one of the most exciting things to happen in a long time around women in sport. This has been this incredible investment by Status of Women Canada. It was led by the Coaching Association of Canada in Alberta in partnership with Alberta Sport Connection. There are 2 days left to apply for this, and it's a huge opportunity. I won't speak to it in too much length because I know that Vicki and Aaron can go into greater detail, but it is effectively is about, applying to this program with the idea of joining into a community of organizations and leaders who are going to be working together in concert with one another to address different priorities that the organizations self-identify. So you can come forward with, like, this is the piece of the pie that we're really interested in exploring, and you'll be supported to explore this over the course of 2 years. I might have that wrong, so I apologize. Please correct me, Aaron.
3 years, yeah.
2 years?
3.
And so this represents a great platform for the kind of work that many organizations are looking to do. And if I'm not mistaken, Aaron, I will turn over to you to say there is also some funding within this for the successful applicants to help them bring their work to life. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's right. So Alberta Sport Connection is expanded its commitment with this project. Obviously, it's a priority for our new board of directors as well as ministerial direction that this is essential, and so Alberta Sport Connection is also coming to the table to provide support. So not only is it CAC and the status of women, but also a provincial commitment. So really exciting time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I don't think we've seen much of this work historically, like this type of initiative historically. So it's I would say it's a great springboard for organizations who are interested in gaining access to resources, gaining access to guidance and to some of the leading thinking to help them move something forward within their organization. It's just spectacular. And again, 2 days left, but I would say it's totally worth checking it out and seeing what you could pull off if you haven't yet applied. So then, CAAWS, speaking really specifically about long-term athlete development, this is a great resource for you to get your hands on, and it's representative of a whole series of resources that CAAWS makes available on its website around consideration for girls and young women in the LTAD model in the scheme. Again, you do not need to start with a blank page or to surf around, the entire internet to find things. Come to our website and you will find a really comprehensive set of resources. We do have print versions of this particular resource, which it gives a really thorough review of LTAD and the sorts of things that are unique to the needs of women and young girls in the LTAD model, and gives a lot of very practical guidance on an age and stage basis, as well as on a, what would I say, like for different roles within the system. So recommendations for coaches, recommendations for program leaders, for parents, and so on and so forth. You will also find webinar recordings. You will find video recordings. You will find a number of downloadable resources that are easily shareable. You can integrate them into team meetings. You can circulate them. But again, whether you're using them as thought starters to kind of advance organizational interest and readiness for these sorts of conversations, or you're totally ready and you're looking at, okay, how do we take this further? There are resources here that can support you with this. And I can't remember what order my slides are in, so I'm just going to click through one here. Yeah, okay, sorry, flipping around a little bit there. One thing I have to mention is that, so CAAWS has developed a 1-hour presentation that can be delivered in person, or it can be delivered via webinar, and we can provide the platform for that if that's not something that you have in-house. It is delivered by people who have significant expertise on this, and it walks you through several of the key considerations. So while I'm staying really high level, this one takes pages out of this particular guide that I have here on the screen and dives deep into them with considerations around things like developing effective programs. What are some of the things that you want to think about when it comes to girls and young women? Pitfalls that you want to try to avoid. Very, very tangible recommendations. Some people really want to read it all on the page. Other people like to digest these things in another form. So we have these available to book. And in fact, we are looking to deliver some of these presentations. They can happen at any level for any size of for any size of group, I should mention. And they are super inexpensive. We ask that those hosting it provide an honorarium of $150 to the presenter and to cover their expenses. And in fact, because this is our first year of making it available, we even have some subsidies to make that even a little less expensive. Or you can always partner with another organization and do it as a shared priority. But we don't want cost to be a barrier. We do want to acknowledge the time and expertise of the people who are delivering it. But this is meant to be something that would be really easy for folks to pick up and to deliver. Really about creating engagement on this topic, opening people's eyes, and then, of course, providing all of these great follow-on resources should they want to dive even more deeply into it. Yeah, so an example of turnkey resources, that's a great place to start to get that conversation going. I already showed you this screen, but this is, of course, the CAAWS.ca website. You will find a ton of resources on here, and everything from, you know, tips for after-school programs to newcomer programs and more. And if you ever have trouble navigating it, because there is a lot of content on this site, we'll, of course, be happy to help you. We have a tremendous resource, I have to say once again, sitting around this table in Vicki Harbour. I know that many of you know her well. She also offers a Coaching the Female Athlete workshop, which helps to give people the tools that they need at that coaching, that frontline level, in terms of how do they better serve girls and young women through their coaching. And so I know that Vicki periodically runs this, and because she's based in Alberta, you get the most and best of them. So please, you know, talk to Vicki. I know when she's organizing the next one, it's not something that you want to miss, and it's something that at CAAWS we're really interested in supporting to scale up and replicate further. But here you've got it in your own backyard, so please take advantage. And then, of course, because we know money is so often the number one thing that comes up about why things haven't moved forward. There are two initiatives I want to make you aware of. One is the WISE Fund. That's a CAAWS initiative, Women in Sport Encouragement Fund. On October 2nd, so coming up early next month, we'll be launching the application for this year. It'll end November 10th. And we're offering 10 $1,000 grants for initiatives to advance LTAD inclusion and engagement for girls and young women, and also to advance women in coaching. And I can guarantee you at least one will be given out to an organization or an individual in Alberta. So I encourage you to check it out. You will also find that, let me flip to the slide, oops, the Fueling Women Champions. So Dairy Farmers has their Champions Fund. They have $150,000 that they're giving out. Deadline is September 20th this month. They're giving it out in 30 grants of $5,000 each. So I sat on the selection committee last year, and you know, money went to individual athletes, it went to teams, and it also went to initiatives and organizations who were leading specific projects to advance girls and young women. So these sorts of opportunities don't come up all the time, and so I really recommend that this is something you look into, or if you're serving organizations, that this be something that you share with them and you push out through your networks.
Alison, if I can interrupt, we had a quick question. Can you repeat for Katie the session that you mentioned? I'm not sure if it was either the coaching leadership session that Vicki mentioned or the one prior to. I believe it was the 1 hour session. What is the title?
That is a really good question. What is the title? It's Long-Term Athlete Development Considerations for Girls and Women. Young women, sorry, I should say. I would be happy, if anybody has any questions following this, you can email me at Allison, ALLISON, @CAAWS.ca, and I could absolutely point you in the right direction, send you details, all of those sorts of things. It would be my pleasure.
Awesome.
All right, thank you for the interest. Okay, so what else are we working on? So I wanted to bring your attention just really quickly, a few things in the leadership realm. Mid-October, mid to late October, you're getting a little bit of sneak peek of one of the covers of the guides that are being developed. CAAWS has been working with the Coaching Association of Canada for the last 2.5 years on a female coach mentorship model. We know how valuable mentorship is for advancing women in coaching, women in leadership. And this is, again, designed to take some of the effort out of it at an organizational level. So we have developed and piloted a theory-based model that we then have these very tangible guides being finalized. They're in translation right now. One for the sport admin or the organization, one for the mentees, and one for the mentors. And it's really to set up those successful relationships. And though it's been done really with a coaching angle, we know that this can be adopted and applied in any number of leadership settings. And it's certainly our expectation, and it was by design that we made it to work at all levels in the sports system. We also offer Women on Boards resources, Women on Boards presentations as well. So if that's something that you're looking at from an organizational perspective, again, this is something that we can do to help you get those conversations going and to support change in that regard. And then we offer women in leadership workshops as well. And this is a way that whether that as organizations, you can host these, or you can find a group of organizations to host these, or if you see it happening somewhere, you make sure that you sign folks up for it. But these are women-only sessions really designed to help build the network, build the connections and supports between women, and also to provide them with professional development that can help expand their leadership skills and their ability to navigate their career opportunities successfully. So these two themes that you've seen running throughout the presentation, keeping girls in sport and advancing women in leadership, these are the two main strategic directions for CAAWS going forward. They're consistent with our history as an organization, but they're really where we're going to be dialing in over the next 3 years. And one of the things, we could do it in either order, so I'm going to leave it to you, Erin, to decide which order we should do it in. Would love to answer any questions that folks might have, but also really interested to hear from you, what we want what we're doing to be valuable and relevant to the needs and interests of sport and physical activity organizations. We want it to fit with your priorities and make it easier for you to create change. And so I would love any input that you might have in terms of resources that you've just heard about that really jump out at you as being valuable, or other things that you think would be really great to have your hands on as to make leading this forward easier. And finally, I think we also do want to hear from Katie and Haley and anyone else. Certainly would love to hear more about the Ever Active Schools initiative with the Girls Run Club, but to hear what other folks are doing. So that might be a bit ambitious for 15 minutes. Erin, perhaps you can provide us with a bit of guidance on where you think our time would be best spent.
Well, yeah, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and just your commitment to Alberta, coming out here at the Leadership Conference. We couldn't appreciate it anymore. Listening to the folks. I'd like to say to let everybody know that we have a memorandum of understanding that's in the process of being worked out through CAAWS and Alberta Connection to really try to expand on that education component. So what we need to support the sport delivery system in Alberta is that piece. Is that what we feel? So right now it's the senior leadership. We're trying to work it out, and hopefully we'll be able to expand on these modules for you guys. So and with saying that, we would love to hear more about how you feel and where would you like this to go. And I know it's a big task, but we can just have a discussion around it and go from there. And I will be moderating the chat box as well.
Okay, sounds great. Maybe we can start with any questions. I know I went really fast, so there may be one or two, or happy to take them offline on email as well.
Questions for Allison?
Was the mentorship guide available, or is that still being developed?
I'm giving you a little bit of a heads up. It's still being developed, so translation and design are happening right now. In conversation with the CAC, we expect that it will be launching in the looking at my calendar, 3rd or 4th week of October. We are going to be doing a workshop in the pre-conference of the CAC Sport Leadership Conference in Calgary. in that what, the 1st to whatever of November. I guess it must be on the 1st of November. And so if this is something that piques your interest and you're going to have 1 or 2 folks available to go to the conference, we do have a workshop booked for that time where we will be presenting it, walking people through it, and it'll be a great opportunity to really interact with it. But beyond that, it will live online on the CAC's website. And you know, if you're on our newsletter, if you're on the CAC's newsletter, you will see that, and I'm sure it will come out through the PTCRs as well, through Alberta Sport Connection, but you will see us start to push it out so that you can access it, and it will be totally available for free to download online.
Thanks. Allison, that pre-conference at the Petro-Canada, for people that can't attend in person, are there opportunities for people to conference call in, to web video conference in?
That's a great question. I don't know what their capacity is, but I will, I'll ask them about that.
Could I ambush it? Come in with my webcam?
Yeah.
Potentially, I mean, we would be really excited about that. And, you know, go ahead.
The reason I ask is even though Edmonton and Calgary is close, it is midweek, and there's always groups that can't, you know, commit the travel time and so on, or the budget. And when something like this is so precious in light of what we're trying to do here in Alberta, that would be brilliant if that opportunity for people to dial in would be possible. And if
Well, I could figure out this way too if it works.
yeah.
I know the audio isn't the best at times, but we'll see.
Okay, well, let me take that away. I think that's brilliant, Vicki, and it's totally the right way to think about that. So I will, I'll talk to the CAC about their conference and what might be possible, and then yeah, Aaron, if we could have some support with that, that would be fantastic.
Do my best.
Okay, all right, we'll circle back on that one and let you know where we land with it.
I have a question for the group. So if everything goes according to plan, we're able to expand on that education component. The offerings that CAAWS does have, is it better to do one-offs at different modules at different times, or is it better to do a full day and have multiple sessions throughout the day, and we can create awareness around that, or any thoughts that would work best for the groups in the room? A certain month that will work better than others, certain time of the year. I know everybody has different programmers certainly in the room, but something to think about if we don't have any answers, and feel free to drop me an email.
Mm-hmm.
That's a chronic.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
You know, when to offer and where and so on. But honestly, I think, you know, we're not short on good information. Where we're really crippled is getting into the hands of people who can do something with it. And I honestly think the way we traditionally offer awesome information it's not working.
Yeah.
And so, and I would say, first come, first serve. If there's something that works for you and your organization, speak up and make it yours, and we get to trial it. You know?
It feels like you're hollowing down that same echo chamber, right? Yeah. What about, do you guys do presentations at all when it comes to at AGMs, when it comes to, or board meetings, when it comes to the leadership on returning on boards or things like that? Have you any experience there, Allison?
Oh, sorry, you're putting that to me.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So when we're developing these, we generally assume that they're probably going to be slotting into something. You know, absolutely, they're sometimes done as standalones, but for instance, the Women on Boards, we've done we've developed 2 different presentations. One is for women, so really to engage them around the idea of pursuing board opportunities and setting them up for success, and that one runs around 45 minutes. The one for the boards runs only at about 30 minutes, maybe a little more if you tacked on some Q&A time. And so they're really intended to be, again, thought starters, trying to expand people's imaginations around the value of having women on boards, what it brings to the organization. and also cultural considerations for bringing on women on the board and how to do that successfully. And finally, just the mechanics of it. So where to find women and things like that as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Anything else?
Question about the statistics at the beginning of your presentation.
Mhm.
Decline, I assume those were Canadian numbers?
Yes, they were. Yeah, it was a Canadian study. It's available on our website, and I can send it to Aaron. He could circulate it. It was a study done a couple of years. It was released in March 2016, so just last spring.
So a question on that is that number consistent with all the rest of the Western world?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, would be the short answer. I think we can make some assumptions. Around that, because certainly what we hear from other countries, whether it's the UK and their initiatives there, the US, they've got Title IX working in their favor, but certainly the work of organizations similar to ours and governments often reflects similar gaps. Certainly the gap exists. Whether some are a little higher, some are a little lower, I'm not totally sure where we would fall in relation to others, but it's a universal challenge that people around the world are trying to address, for sure.
I'm not so concerned about the absolute numbers. It's more the trend. Is the trend the same everywhere? Because if culture is a big factor in girls and young women's participation, if you look at a country that maybe doesn't have that trend, what's the culture there that keeps them involved?
Oh, that's a great question. I would have to take that one away, but I like the way that, I like where you were taking it, and I think it speaks to the fact that, sport doesn't live in a vacuum, and the participation of any one demographic is influenced by things within sport or physical activity, but also beyond it. And so a lot of our work is, how do we equip sport and physical activity to do what it can to address those sorts of things, knowing that media and cultural values and all sorts of things, create other barriers over which sport can do little. But what we can do, we should do.
Awesome. Any others?
I'll make one more comment then, since it's a vacuum. I've been to most of the sport leadership or Sport for Life conferences in Ottawa Gatineau over the last few years. And some years I found were really good for case study type presentations. For the last 2, maybe 3 years, they've really waned on that side. There's been a lot more theoretical stuff presented. And I think that kind of leaves everybody guessing how to implement it. And we don't get enough of, this is what we've done and this is how it's worked out. And I realize you're not an organizer of that, but maybe through your networks, we can encourage people who are doing good things to get there and present it.
You know what, that is the very conversation that we're having within CAAWS, as we consider what we bring to the conference, for instance. What we really realize is that there's still that need for that theoretical and that education, but people are ready for the next step. And how do we make sure that that for the people who are ready to move, we're providing them with those examples, with the things that they can borrow from or learn from. And so the conversation around case studies is a major one at the moment as it happens. And in fact, how are we doing for time, Aaron? We may have opportunity today to hear about what's happening around this community of people that have gathered just today, whether it be what's happening with Everactive Schools or others. But there are good things happening, and CAAWS wants to do a better job of shining a spotlight on those so that people can learn from them. Absolutely.
Allison, was there a question?
Yes.
Well, I just thought that we'd take the last couple minutes to hear from Katie and the Run Club.
Okay, then I'll.
What do you think?
Well, just super quick, that idea of creating a network for continued conversations. Because that's true what George just talked about, is that best practices, but sometimes people will hear a best practice and go, well, that works for them, but my world, my context is quite different. But the idea is planted, but if there is some network for that continued conversation to build on that, saying, so this is what you did in basketball, how might it work for me over in curling? You know, and those dialogues, I think, adds value to the planting of the seed. Say, so I know ever active schools, but that's just something we can chat about later.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Tell us about Interactive Schools and the project you're running with Haley. Or yes, is she here?
Hi, yeah, sorry, I can pick up most of it. So yeah, we have a project called Go Run, which stands for Girls Only Run Clubs, and it's an offshoot of our existing AMA Youth Run Club, which is in 450 schools across Alberta. So we're kind of working off that because we know we already have an interested audience, and we're hoping to create a program that helps support schools to either increase the number of females that they have in their mixed run clubs, or provide them with supports to host girls-only run clubs that will help those girls gain the confidence and competence to keep running and moving beyond the club. So this fall, we are supporting a minimum of 18 schools, and then same thing in the summer, but we're hoping to have a lot more, and the support is through a variety of ways. So we're going to have some workshops that we're hoping to connect with CAAWS and Vicky on to figure out what those should look like. We'll have a handbook for coaches, some games and activities for those run clubs to do, and really just creating a conversation around it and providing that extra support for schools to host run clubs. So that's the gist of the program. It is just in the beginning stages as we're officially launching it this week, but we already have quite a few interested schools, and we're excited to get into the schools and see what we can do with it.
Awesome, excellent.
Oh, Allison, you're muted.
Thank you. I was talking to myself. I was just saying good luck with the launch.
Oh, you're not.
Thank you.
Talk to yourself. Great. Allison, if I could just add one more sort of announcement around Agriculture Canada. Those of you that are, I will be running that coaching female athlete workshop.
Awesome.
It's not part of the conference. Leah Weens, who's at Repsol, it'll be the afternoon of Saturday, November the 4th. And so it'll be hosted by Repsol with support of Alberta Sport Connection. And so for those people that are there, if you want to spend an extra afternoon there, or for others that are in the neighborhood, and just to sort of, when conferences emerge, the time to take advantage of people.
Awesome. Well, we'll do what we can as well to promote that. And I think now is a good time for it as well, given that people are probably booking their flights. So if they're not local, they might want to linger.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Allison.
Well, to wrap
Super.
up, I'd like to say thanks again to Allison and everybody. Certainly, with any questions or contacts, you feel free to reach out to Allison directly, but any further to this, you can certainly reach out to me as well. So thanks for everybody that was online, and the information and the stuff that Allison was going to forward to me will be posted on the website. So thanks again, and see you in a month.
Excellent.
Super. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Allison.